We're so glad that you've joined us for this week's message from Anchor Chapel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Our hope is that you will be both encouraged and challenged in your relationship with Jesus. Be blessed as you listen to this week's message.
All right, so I don't know if you guys have noticed this. It's something that I see all the time, and every time Brooke and I will go eat out, go to a restaurant, I just notice I'm always aware of the differences between men and women. I don't know if you've noticed the differences, but there are quite a few. But whenever it comes to like going to a restaurant, one of the things that stands out to me is very interesting, and I think it's telling of like the way that God created us. So like a man will go into the restaurant, and this is my perspective anyway. The first thing I do when I go into a restaurant is I'm looking for the exit. I'm looking for like, how do we get out of here in case somebody goes crazy, in case somebody has a gun, in case something happens. I'm looking for the exit. So I'm walking in and I'm like, door at 10 o'clock, door at 2 o'clock. You know, I'm just like, well, for you, that'd be 10 and 2. But for me, it'd be, 2 and 10. But anyway, I'd be going to the exit and I'd be like, how do we get out of here? It's like, here. Okay. And I'll talk to Brooke and I'm like, I'm thinking exit. Guy's thinking of the exit. But the girl, when she's walking in, she's not thinking of the exit. She's thinking of the entrance. So she'll come in, she'll be like, I wonder who I know here. She's, she's walking around and she's like, I wonder if anybody's going to see me. Is my hair right? I just came in from outside. She's thinking about how she looks to everybody else, and the guy's looking for the threats. Like he's going to I'm about to punch somebody just because I walk through this door. I'm just like guys are just so different. We have this protective bone in us that is good. But one of the things that I just notice about this is that because we're so different, we can often speak to the opposite sex in the way that we respond. So what ends up happening is guys will be rougher with girls. And you'll be a little, you just won't have the sensitivity, but women respond to that. And a woman might be like, I just need to know your feelings. I need to know how you, and guys like, oh, you lost me a long time ago. So that's there's these keys to understanding how the opposite sex works so that we can better communicate and have better relationships. And this is actually in Scripture. I'm not just having a relationship talk today. I'm not just doing an Oprah show this morning. But we're this is in the Bible, that it's important that we learn how to speak to one another. And here's what ends up happening. We end up, if we don't learn how to communicate to the opposite sex, we end up turning off each other. And we end up repulsing each other, really. I don't know if you know what a time-lapse video is, but a time-lapse video is a video that you create that is really just combined, a bunch of photos combined together to make a video, and it's usually sped up. And it's going to be something that happened over a long period of time, but it's going to be compressed into a shorter clip. So it might be a sunrise, it might be something else. But I remember doing a time-lapse video at the church that we came from one morning, and we set up the camera, and we did a time-lapse that Sunday morning, and we had the whole crowd coming in, and it was a cool video that was an hour long and that compressed down to 5 seconds. So it was really cool, but in the video, one of the things I noticed was a conversation that was happening. And they started off kind of on this side of the room, and they're talking, these two people. And over the course of the hour, they move about 30 feet, and they move together. And what I noticed was the guy who was doing all the talking was pushing the guy who wasn't talking backwards. So the guy who wasn't talking was trying to retreat the whole time, all right, I got to do something. I got to get out. And he's walking backwards, and the other guy's just talking and talking, and he's just following him where he goes. You ever have that happen where you're trying to get out of a conversation, and they're just I'll just follow you. You want to the bathroom? Let's go. I got to go too. And you're I'm trying to get out of this. But that happened that morning, and I was like, this is so funny, because this guy, and not only was he talking, but he's a close talker, so he's right here, and the guy was I don't know if it was morning breath or just boring conversation, but this whole time, this guy's retreating while the one doing the speaking is just, he keeps on talking. And I just thought, what a picture of relationships. And many times we just keep talking, but it's not making a difference. And you end up repulsing the opposite sex, and your husband or your wife, or maybe someone that you were hoping would be your husband or your wife, just ends up being I just got enough of this. And I don't want to hear anymore. Because we're not learning how to communicate to each other. I think once you understand the way that God created us, and that's the story we're going to look at today, then we understand what it looks like to have fruitful conversation. So we're going to look at I think this is one of the most beautiful love stories in Scripture. We're going to go to the book of Ruth. And in this story, man, this is so cool what God ends up bringing up. There's all kinds of themes that you can look at, but I want to focus on the way that they treated each other. And I think they treated each other a certain way because they understood each other. So really what I'm trying to get at today is not just change the way you talk, but understand how we're created. understand how a woman's created, how a woman responds, understand how a man's created, how a man responds. This is how God created us. And if we can understand that, then our communication, our relationships will be much stronger. So Ruth 2, and really just kind of set up the story. Ruth is the daughter-in-law of a woman named Naomi, who was a Jew, and she ended up moving to Moab. Okay, so this woman, both Naomi and Ruth were Moabite women, but they had a Jewish husband. Naomi's husband was a Jewish man, so ended up having family, and they ended up moving back, so they were kind of foreigners, and moved back to the land of God's people. Okay, so this is where they end up finding Boaz, who's also an Israelite. So in verse 5, this is kind of where it picks up. Then Boaz asks his foreman, he sees Ruth working in the fields, and this is what he says: "Who is that young woman over there?" So Boaz is saying, "Hey girl, look at this girl over there." He's noticing her. He's realizing, hey, she's pretty. He's trying to find out a little bit about her. Who does she belong to? So who's her man? Does she have a man? Verse 6, then the foreman replied, "She's a young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters, and she's been in hard work ever since." So Naomi and Ruth were both both widows. So they had a hard time taking care of themselves, and so they're kind of looking like, hey, let's just do whatever we can to find someone who will cover us and protect us, take care of us. So she ends up working and trying to just find some protection under Boaz's his operation here. Okay, so she's been at hard work ever since, except for a few minutes to rest in the shelter. Verse 8, Boaz went over to Ruth. "Listen, my daughter, stay here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields." So he's saying, I got you. "Stay right behind the other young women working in my field. See which part of the field they're harvesting, and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly." Well, some girls would love it if their men would stand up for them like this, huh? "I have warned the other young men, don't treat you roughly, and when you're thirsty, help yourself to the water that I've drawn from the well." Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I'm only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother in your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you've done." "I hope I continue to please you, sir," she replied, "for you have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I am not one of your workers." So what's interesting in the story and what is happening is that this woman, Ruth, she needs someone to care for her. She needs someone to take care of her. She needs someone to protect her. She needs someone to provide for her. And this man, Boaz, he notices Ruth. And he's like, hey, she's a pretty woman. What's she doing in my field over here? I don't recognize her. So he finds out a little bit about her. But what's beautiful about this is he is attracted to her. It says that he notices her. He's attracted to her, but he still treats her with respect. And I think too many guys today, they end up, because they're attracted to someone, they end up letting their hormones take over. And because the person that you're attracted to, you can end up treating like garbage because you don't understand how to communicate. You don't understand how the other person functions. And there are so many men today that are living by their sex drive, and that's leading, and that's what's happening. That's why we've got a problem today with sexuality in our culture. That's why the Me Too movement is happening. We've got all these men who think that power is what women are responding to, or what women want. But these women, they need men who understand their calling, and the reason that God created them, and the reason men and women are different is because we both need each other. And women don't need men to be rough and to be abusive, but they need. I love this picture of what Boaz is saying. He's treating her with integrity. He is attracted to her. He does want to know about her, but he's treating her with integrity. And if you look at the theme of the story, the theme of Boaz and Ruth's relationship, you see these two themes again and again. You see value and respect. Value and respect. So there was, from Ruth's side, she respected Boaz. And that's what men really are looking for. But from Boaz's side, even though he really was powerful in this story, he valued her. You look at who she was, look at her past, and she ends up saying something. She says something along the lines of, man, I'm not even worthy to be here. I know I'm from another place. I'm a foreigner here. I've got different gods than you, but I've chosen to just live among you. I'll come here and I'll respect the land that I live in. I'll respect the rules that you have or whatever. And he's like, listen, I know where you come from, but you're here now. And your history doesn't mean as much to me. I don't care where you've been, but right now you're here. And I want to steward and love you right where you are. And I think that, man, there's so many of us, and one of the problems that we have in relationships, and one of the things that keeps on coming up is all this stuff in the past. And we've got things that we can bring back at each other. And you know, like whenever you first are dating someone, you're like excited and like you're all complimentary and you know, everything's exciting. But then eventually, what ends up happening is you both have a little bit of history. And if we're not careful, that little bit of history can become a lot of ammo. And we take that ammo and we take that history and we end up using it against each other and abusing each other. But that's not the way that God created us to work. So, you know, just an example, Brooke and I, how man, we still have issues with this sometimes. Our first day in Disney a couple weeks ago, we're at Magic Kingdom, and at night they always do like a big fireworks show. And this is like, it was a massive crowd. So we're all the way back at like the entrance watching, just flooded the streets. So there's people everywhere. And Brooke says, hey, I'm going to run to the store really quick at this corner, and I'm going to see if I can find, I forgot what it was. She was trying to find something. So I'm standing there, and I've got my camera around my neck. I'm like taking photos and stuff. My dad's here. I've got like people around me, and I've got the stroller that Judah is in right in front of me. Judah's in the stroller. So I'm taking photos and everything, you know. And then all of a sudden, I stop, and I look down, and I'm like, well, Judah's not there. So I look to the side, and I'm like, Dad, did you see Judah? Like, where'd he go? And he's like, I didn't see him. So I turn around, and I look around, and all of a sudden, I start to panic. And I look around, and I'm like, there's nothing but people. It's a sea of people. And I'm like, where's my son? And I look, and I text Brooke immediately, and I'm like, you have Judah, right? And she texts back immediately, I do not, exclamation points, and she calls me immediately, where's my son? Like this. So she's freaking out. I'm freaking out. I see my mom like off in the corner, like away from kind of the crowd. I run over there. I'm like, where's Judah? Do you have him? I don't have him. Nobody has Judah. We don't know where Judah is, like the worst case scenario. So I'm panicking, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I run to the store and I meet Brooke. And when on my way running over there, someone stops me and said, did you lose a boy? And I'm like, yes, I did. And he's like, I've been looking for the most panicky person in this crowd, and I found you. It's like my wife found him. So the moment I get to Brooke, this family brings up Judah, and we find Judah's screaming his eyes out. And when Judah cries, every orifice on his face has got liquid coming out of it. So he's got snot and spit and tears, everything coming out. And I'm like, oh my heart is beating. Brooke's heart is beating. We're like in this moment, we composed ourselves fairly well. Like she didn't curse at me or anything, but I definitely deserved it. But I'm like, it was so funny. She said, you didn't hear me? I told you, I'm going to the store, watch Judah. And I'm like, I didn't even think about that. Like, I didn't think he'd go anywhere. But what happened is he saw Brooke leave and he took off, but she didn't know and I didn't notice. And man, it was just a moment. It was like the next day was real tense between us. So we're at Epcot the next day. And like everything's tense. And by the end of that afternoon, like we're talking, you know, and I forget what the conversation was exactly, but Judah runs ahead and she's like, get him. I'm like, I got him. She's like, well, you lost him yesterday. And I'm like, all right. Not that you're wrong, but what was interesting, what was happening in the conversation and the reason things were so tense is because neither one of us were getting what we needed from each other. And here's what the story of Ruth and Boaz shows us. Women want and women respond to security and value, understanding I'm safe, my kids are safe, our finances are going to be okay, you've got me. And men respond to validation and respect. This is what men need, this is what men desire. And in a moment like that, in a situation like that, none of that was happening. And that's what ends up happening. There's so many things that could happen in your relationships, and it could be a financial thing, it could be a kid thing, it could be a history thing that keeps getting brought up, it could be someone's dropped the ball somewhere, maybe it's continuing to, but when those things are missing from a relationship, you will have conflict. And whatever it takes to get back to value and affirmation, value and respect, security and respect, that's what we need, that's what we're looking for. So we have to learn how to get back to that place. So Matt Chandler says in his book, I always like trying to quote books on subjects that are like this, that you can like continue to grow and study in. There's this incredible book that I read on relationships called The Mingling of Souls by Matt Chandler. One of the things he says in there is he says, the deepest cries of our hearts so often can be characterized by a desperate desire for our whole selves to be known and at the same time delighted in. So this is what men and women are hoping in conversation. If you understand me, what I'm looking for, what I need, then you'll speak to me right. You'll speak to me in a way that I will respond. And if you can understand as a husband or as a wife, if you can understand your spouse or your significant other that you're hoping to become your spouse one day, if you can understand them, then your communication will be powerful. And it's going to be fruitful. And it's not going to fall flat. And it's not going to repulse the other person. So we have to learn to understand each other. Whenever we were in Mexico, earlier this year, we found ourselves following a guy, Oscar, who's in this photo right next to Ryan. He was one of our translators, and he was kind of guiding us. And I'm driving this van, and I'm following him in this little car. And he realized that he wanted us to go somewhere else, and we were supposed to find our own way or whatever on the streets in Mexico, right? So he stops in the middle of the street, like you do, and he just sticks his hand out the window, and he starts waving frantically and yelling. Now, he's yelling at me in Spanish because his English is not great. So I'm just hearing, and he's pointing all over it, and I'm just like, I don't understand anything that's happening. Nothing is registering here. So I'm just parked. I'm just in the middle of the road, and Ryan's sitting right next to me in the front seat, and we're like, what, did you understand what he said? I don't know what he's talking about. And he's just doing this. And he's like, and I'm like, do you want me to go around you? Am I supposed to turn here? Like, what? And I finally figured out, oh, this is the turn. But he didn't get out or didn't tell us before, hey, there's going to be a turn coming up. And I was just winging it in the moment. And I was just like, man, this is exactly what happens whenever Brooke and I are not on the same wavelength. We don't understand each other. And I get frustrated, and I'm like, come on, woman. And I'm waving, and she'll get frustrated. Come on, what's wrong with you? You lost our son. And I'm just there could just be moments when you're not on the same wavelength. You're not speaking the same language. You don't understand each other, and you get lost in the mix. So there's just a few key things. I feel like this message is going to be all over the place. But there's a few key things that I think are going to be helpful for us. And one of the things, good communication, I want to just talk about what good communication looks like. One of the things that good communication is good communication is caring. It is caring. It cares about the other person. It is concerned about where they are right now. Think about whenever you first started dating, if you're married, or maybe you're still dating someone right now, maybe you've seen this change already, but whenever Brooke and I first got married, we would talk on the phone that was tied to the wall. It had a cord, and it would go all the way to the wall, and I'd have to pull that thing into my bed, and we'd lay down at night, and I'd be talking to her, and I'd be like, I gotta go to work, but I love you more. No, I love you more. Just dumb stuff, right? We're not finding out much about each other. We're just talking because we're so in love, and we're just I don't want to hang up because no, you hang up first. No, you hang up. I'm not gonna hang up on you because I love you so much. I'm not gonna. And we're just so ridiculous. Now she calls me, and I'm like, what? What do you want? Can you text me this? Not that I'm frustrated, but it's just the magic of the phone call has been lost. And if you're not careful, the things that were once magic can become mundane, and they can become annoying, and and I just think that that's one of the things that when you care for each other, then the magic stays alive. You care about what they need. You care about what they desire. You're thinking about their perspective and how they feel about that moment. You're not just trying to say something, but you want to make sure that you're communicating in such a way that it builds and it flourishes. It makes them flourish, and it gives them strength and dignity. That's what good communication is. And you think, man, isn't it? It's one of the most annoying things. If you go to a restaurant and you have a waiter or a waitress, you have someone serving at your table that just doesn't care. You know what I mean? They come and they're like, anybody need a drink or anything? Y'all ready to order yet? I mean, how long y'all going to be here? You just have moments like that, where every now and then you're I know they must have had a bad day, but this is making for a really bad experience. And it's no fun whenever that happens. But when it comes to a husband and wife, we're meant to serve each other. And you can tell when they don't like it anymore. You can tell when there's not a caring bone in the conversation. A good conversation. Godly conversation, the way that the picture that we see in Ruth and Boaz's story is it is caring. They care about each other. They care. They lift each other. And one of the things I would just caution you on, if you're not married yet, but you're already fighting before bills get introduced, before kids get introduced, before you have to change a diaper, before morning breath, you in trouble. If you can't make it through that stuff now, you in serious trouble. You probably don't like each other. You probably would be better off either getting some counseling or go separate ways, because there's going to be some real stuff that happens in your life eventually. And you've got to be able to care for each other through that and navigate through that in a healthy way. So, all right. So, and then the other thing is let's look at the other verse. So the next verse, if you continue just down, I think this is so cool. Naomi notices how Boaz is treating Ruth. And she says this in verse 22. She says, you might be harassed in other fields, but you will be safe with him. You'll be safe with him. I love what Naomi notices as a good mother-in-law, as a good someone who cares about Ruth. She's saying, listen, I've noticed this thing about Boaz. Like there might be other fields that you would go to and the men would try to take advantage of you. And the men would say, yeah, you can have some stuff if you let's hook up or whatever. And they're going to try to take advantage. But Boaz isn't like that. He sees you and he sees the need and he sees that you're humble and but he's caring. He wants the best for you. He's trying to bless you. There's something about this guy. And because of this, Ruth listens to her. Ruth, I think, shows wisdom that so many singles don't show today. If there are people that you love, that care for you, that love you and value you, who see all kinds of warning signs and red flags in your relationship, and you aren't willing to listen, you're going to make some stupid relationship decisions. Because you ever heard the phrase, love is blind? I don't even think it is love. I think it's just infatuation is blind. Because in the moment, you get so caught up, oh, he makes me feel so special. Well, he's a jerk. She makes me feel so great. She makes me, yeah, well, she's also made other guys feel great. Like, is there, you think about this, like there's people that love you, that they can see stuff you can't see. Learn to listen to them. That's wisdom. Learn to listen to what they're saying. So Naomi says, listen, okay, there's going to be this guy, you got to pursue him. So she's got some plans for like their future. She's like planning a wedding already. She's getting all excited about this. This is so cool. So you might be harassed in other fields, but you'll be safe with him. I love this picture. So if you, and I'll just say this to singles, if you're being harassed, especially young girls, get out of it. Get out of it. You deserve better. There's no reason to wait around in that. God will reward you, and there's somebody better. We always wonder where have all the good guys going. There's some good guys. There's some good guys. But if you ever feel harassed and you feel pressured, get out of that. He's a loser. You don't need that. Okay, the next thing that I think is real key, good communication involves this. Good communication involves praise. Good communication involves praise. You should praise way more than you critique in your relationship. If you're always tearing each other down, that's not how you caught that person. You didn't catch that person by insult. You didn't go on the first date and be like, oh, man, you wore that? Okay, well, that's fine. It looks okay. That color eyeshadow, really? It looks a little cakey. Or, what? You're not going to go into like a relationship and be like, I don't know what it is. He makes me feel so valuable. Like if you're hearing insults all the time. If that's not how you got somebody, then that shouldn't be how the relationship continues. There shouldn't be that all of a sudden like, oh, man, you put on a few pounds. If you really love that person and cared for that person, then you're going to continue to praise them. This is what Jesus does to us. He's not always bringing up all of what you did. He's not always bringing up all of our mistakes. If you're looking for a redemptive relationship, which is what I believe all relationships should be, they're a picture of the relationship between Jesus and his church, then it needs to be a relationship full of praise and full of honor and building each other and lifting each other up. So if you're in one that's already insulting you, you're going to be in trouble. You could be in trouble. Proverbs 27, and I'm picking on the girls once, but Proverbs 27:15, it talks about how being in a house with a quarrelsome woman is like being under a roof with a constant dripping. It's just annoying. So there has to be praise. If your relationships aren't bathed in praise, it's going to get old. So learn to speak to each other with praise and honoring each other. I think that's what the key is. This is what Matt Chandler says about this subject in his book, Mingling of Souls. He says, one sure way to walk in foolishness in a romantic relationship is to date someone who troubles the godly counselors in your life. So going back to what Naomi saw, she saw, you're going to be safe with him. Whoa, almost fell off the stage. He values you. He sees the beauty in you, even though you're a foreigner. I love the picture that she's like, but I'm a foreigner. And he's like, yeah, whatever. But I've seen the way that you responded in this situation. I've seen the character in you. I've seen the goodness in you. And that's what I'm attracted to. And I just love that. And you've got to have somebody in your life who realizes, look, this person, they're praising you. They're building you up. This is the kind of person that you need to continue in relationship with. So Ruth ends up saying, okay, I'm going to try to get these two connected. We're going to try to have a wedding. So in Ruth 3, it says this in verse 1. One day, Naomi said to Ruth, my daughter, it's time that I found a permanent home for you. I'm about to kick you out. You either get a job or it's time that I found a permanent home for you so that you will be provided for. Now do as I tell you. Take a bath. Step 1. Put on perfume. Some of you are like, man, I've been having so much relationship trouble. Maybe it's take a bath. Take a bath. Put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes. This is so cool. Then go to the threshing floor. But don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating and drinking. Be sure to notice where he lays down. In verse 4, Then go in and uncover his feet and lie down there, and he will tell you what to do. And then verse 8, jump to that. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly wakes up and he turns over and he's surprised to find a young woman lying at his feet. Who are you, he asked. I'm your servant, Ruth, she replied. Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer. And it's such a powerful story, but I want to look at just a couple things in this. So, bath, perfume, dress up. This is what Naomi ends up saying. Go take a bath, go dress up, put on some perfume. So there's this picture of look your best, okay? Be concerned about how you look. But then it says go and wait at the threshing floor. All throughout Scripture, threshing floor is kind of a proving ground. It is where the wheat would hit the floor and the wheat kernels would fall out while all the junk would just fly up in the air. And it would separate the stalks and the chaff from the wheat kernels. And in the threshing floor, it was really a picture of something being tested. It was judgment. So what I think the picture of this, even if Naomi didn't understand it, is present the best part of you, yes. But be authentic. Be authentic. Don't be somebody that you're not. Be authentic where you are. So when Boaz sees you, he's gonna recognize you finally whenever he wakes up, and there's gonna be this moment where this woman cares about me. She made herself look, she did up her hair or whatever. And she cares about me. So she's trying to make a move. But I see who she is. I see her soul. She's revealing her soul to me. And I think it's so cool that like you've got this picture that where there's no lies here. There's this authenticity. And I think this is one of the things that's so valuable. And the last thing I want to mention is that good communication requires truth. Good communication requires truth. I'm watching the Olympics yesterday, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just the first thing I saw, but I'm like in love with curling. I think curling's like the coolest thing. I'm like, are you kidding me? They push that granite little thing all the way over there, and it lands exactly where, and they can curve. I'm like, this is amazing. It's so cool. So I'm watching this, and they're just like, and they let it go. And then when they let it go, and they're trying to judge where it's going to end up, the partner comes, and the partner's all, and the partner's trying to steer that thing and move it where they want. But I noticed they're like yelling at each other and stuff. They're like, no, left, go, left, right. They're like yelling these instructions, and they're working together. I love, this is one of the coolest team sports I've recognized. Just never really noticed it before. But like how incredible it is that these two people would move together in such a precise way. And they're not holding anything back. In this, they're yelling at each other. They're being so honest. They're winning because there's truth in the relationship. There's truth in that. What needs to happen, they're not going to be like, I don't want to offend them, but if they don't push that thing, if they're not toward the left, like it's not going to end up just right, but I don't want to say anything. I don't want to hurt their, no, they're like, we're going to win. And I think there needs to be an attitude in all of us in our relationships that I'm not going to try to be somebody else, and I'm not going to expect or let them be somebody else, but we're going to be honest. We're going to be open. We're going to be authentic with each other. Now, there's going to be, the Bible says, to speak the truth in love. It always has to be bathed in love. But I think that for good communication to happen, it's got to be bathed in truth. We've got to have truth in our relationships, because if you don't, you end up all passive aggressive. Like you're holding stuff from each other, and like you want to say it, but you're not going to say it straight to their face. So you're going to be like, are you sure you're going to eat that salad? Are you sure you're going to eat that steak? Shouldn't you eat a salad? Shouldn't you? You're going to be saying stuff like that. And you're going to be saying like, oh, okay, just let the kids cry, whatever. You don't have to do anything. Don't discipline them. Just leave it up to me. Oh, just sit on the couch. It's fine. I'm just sweeping here. I'm totally like using examples from our marriage, even though Brooke never does this to me. I'm just messing. But like you think about, like this is what ends up happening. If there's not truth, then you end up like despising each other. If you can't speak openly and honest to each other in a tender and loving way, there ends up being such bitterness there. So there's got to be, for good communication, there's got to be truth. And here's the picture that I see. She says, cover me. Cover me. Let the covering cover me. Can you cover the covering that's on your feet? Spread that corner of that covering. I just need a little bit. Could you do this? Because I'm considering you, and I need you to be my family redeemer. This is what women need. This is one of the things that God created us to do, to cover women, to protect and to guard women. So if I could caution all the single people for just a moment, for ladies, if he can't handle no, you shouldn't be in a relationship with him. If you say no and he doesn't respect it, run. Get out of there. He's a loser. He doesn't have self-control. If you're devalued and you're compromised by him, dump him. He's not a man of integrity. He needs to be someone who speaks, and don't wait for him to get he's going to get his act together. I'm going to save him. No, you won't save him. He's going to destroy you. Get out of that right. If you see warning signs, get out of it right now. When you're married, it's not the same story. You need to find counseling, and you need to work on this thing, and you need to be honest, and you need to work through it. But before, you got a chance to make this thing right. Men, here's the problem with pornography. Pornography never says no to you. And this is why I think our generation is where it is. And we've got movies like 50 Shades trilogy coming out that people are celebrating and praising, but then at the same time, we're like, how did Me Too happen? Come on, let's not be foolish. And if Christians are okay with it and be like, oh, it's just fun, I love the sex scenes, I love the whatever, it's romantic, it's whatever. No, we are creating a culture and putting our stamp of approval on a culture that is abusive to women. This is not the way God designed relationships to function. So men, if this is why this is so important. You need to be okay with being shut down sometimes, because sex isn't everything. It's a very small part of your marriage, not before. And here's the other thing I think, if I just mentioned men are called to be a covering. Men, you're called to be a covering, not to get as many women as you can under the covers. So you need to look at women and cover and value them. Not think that they're a game to be played. Not think this is something to be conquered. I've heard guys talk about this. Oh, I love playing hard to get. I love like toying with their emotions or whatever. You're being a loser. This is not what God intended us to be. So single women, single men, think highly of yourself. Think higher. God has created you to have wisdom. And if you don't have enough wisdom and you're making dumb relationship decisions, find somebody who can help you. Ask a parent, ask an adult, ask somebody who can see parts of your relationship that you can't see. Here's a caution that's in the book that I think is beautiful, The Mingling of Souls. He says, therefore, men, don't put the burden of your girlfriend or the fiancé to keep turning down your advances or reminding you of God's design for sex. Don't put her in that position. You lead and do so in a way that protects you both from sexual temptation. Some men would look at a woman or a relationship that's really easy, that like you put the pressure on the girl and she gives in. You look at that as a win. It's not a win. It's not a win. You're losing. You're losing. And you have a woman who doesn't have enough conviction and she doesn't think of herself enough to have a man who's going to cover her. It's not a win if you get what you want out of a relationship when it comes to sexual immorality. It's not a win. We're called to protect and called to build each other up. So women, you've got to think highly of yourself. Girls, you've got to think a little bit higher. Men, you've got to value, and you've got to put value and purpose into the women that you're dating. And man, I just think this is just so valuable. Ruth 4, I'm going to close this right here. The band can come up. Verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth into his home, and listen to this. She became his wife. When he slept with her, the next part, so she became his wife first. Then he slept with her. The Lord enabled her to become pregnant. She gave birth to a son. Then the woman of that town said to Naomi, praise the Lord, he has now provided a redeemer for your family. So you see this, and there's a lot of stuff that you miss in the story. If you want to go back, read the beautiful story in the whole book of Ruth. But what I want you to see about this is that Boaz values Ruth this whole time. And she keeps responding. And what you see is this beautiful picture of balance and purpose in this relationship, because he understood how to value her and make her feel secure. And she understood that he needed respect and affirmation. And you see in the way they communicate, and this thing it ends. It's a fairy tale. But I think that so much of that has to do with the way they learn to communicate to each other and to build each other up. It's a really cool picture about this. But I think ultimately, the thing that I think is important for us to remember is that Boaz, and if every relationship is supposed to be a picture between Jesus and the church, Boaz does an incredible job of illustrating what Jesus does. Because you see this picture, and it says at the end, God has provided a redeemer for the family. So Boaz, in the picture of Jesus in this story, he redeems the one who had lost everything, lost her identity, was in a new country. She was just a foreigner. She had no value. She was just following along, hoping to find some leftovers. She was just a poor woman. But she found value, and she became the queen. And she became it wasn't necessarily a queen, but she became the woman of influence, the wife of Boaz. Such a cool picture. And what I think Jesus offers us today, and if you don't get this part right, you will never get your relationships right. But we've got to understand that Jesus is calling you. He wants to redeem your life. He wants to redeem your families. He wants to redeem your past and say, listen, I know that this is where you come from, but this is how I see you now. So Jesus wants to give us a brand new life. And if you don't have him, then you'll never understand what real love and what selfless love is. And you won't be able to love and communicate to your future husband or wife or your current husband or wife. You won't be able to do that well if you don't know Jesus and have Jesus as your own personal redeemer. So I want to ask you today, as we're going to close in just a couple minutes, I'm going to ask you to stand up with me. And I want to pray for our relationships. I want to pray that God would help us to learn how to speak to one another, how to value each other, how to see each other the way that God designed us to see each other. But not just that. If there's people in this room that you don't know Jesus, I want to invite us all to just respond to Jesus' love for us and say, Jesus, we want you. We accept you. We respond to your great love for us. I'm going to pray over every relationship now. Lord, we thank you, Jesus. We thank you, Jesus, that you and the church, Lord, you're an incredible picture of selfless love. And Lord, I just pray that as we look at you, that we would see, and as we even look in the story of Ruth and Boaz, Lord, that we would see the beauty of conversation and value the way that you created us to function together. God, help us to speak with love. Help us to speak with truth. Help us to speak with a caring spirit to each other. Lord, I pray that husbands will learn to cover their wives. That young men, that we would learn to value young women. That young women, that we would learn to have a higher standard, and that we would look for a man who's willing to cover us. As wives, Lord, that we would learn how to speak value and affirmation, respect to our husbands. Lord, I just pray that all around, that you would help us to be humble enough to make the changes we need to make in our relationships.
Thank you for joining us for this week's message from Anchor Chapel. If you'd like to support the ministry of Anchor Chapel, you can easily do so on our website at anchorchapel.com. You can also follow us on social media at Anchor Chapel. Be blessed, and we'll see you next week.